Welcome to the Grow Podcast. I'm Pastor Mike with New Hope Network. We're here to help you take your next step in your relationship with Jesus. I'm so glad you're with us today.
What's up, New Hope family? Welcome to the Grow Podcast, episode 66. My name is David. I'm so excited that you're with us. So thankful that you join us on the Grow Podcast every week. More of you have been joining us on the Grow Podcast every week, which is exciting.
Yeah. Welcome if you're new to the podcast. We're excited to have you.
Pastor Mike is here with me as always. Hello, Pastor Mike.
Hello, David.
I wonder the newer people that are joining, because we've seen our numbers tick up pretty consistently over the last month and a half or so. I wonder if you are just starting to listen to the Grow Podcast recently, are you going back, and listening to previous ones? Listening to it in chronological order.
Hopefully we've gotten better with time, so maybe we don't want them to go back.
I'm not sure I have. I think I've stayed pretty steady at whatever this is, but I would love to know that. Let us know in a comment if you're a newer listener, and like Pastor Mike said, welcome.
Yeah, glad you're
Thanks for coming to the Grow Podcast.
Yeah, we would love it in the comment. How if you're part of New Hope. What you think. We'd love your feedback, what you would like to hear, those kinds of things. And if you haven't been part of New Hope, if you've just discovered us, we would love to hear how you discovered us along the way.
The most commented Grow Podcast is when I asked everybody to post that your shirt was super keen. And we got a pretty great response. We had a pretty great response to that on our YouTube channel. So I thank you to everybody who did that a couple months ago.
This is more colorful, but with our topic today, I should have worn a shirt of many colors. Many colors? Many colors?
At least you don't speak for a living.
Yeah. Words. I just make up words.
Before we, excuse me, we are talking about Joseph. But before we get to that, I feel like there's two topics that we need to discuss, Pastor Mike, of high importance.
Okay.
One, your face is looking a lot better.
It is.
Which out of context is a entertaining sentence. But so they might not even be able to see on the video podcast.
I shared with our in-person campuses.
But we haven't had a chance to talk about it anywhere online yet.
So I was on a prayer retreat camping in the Black Hills in Rapid City, and
a baby was being chased by a bear. It was incredible.
Michael, our producer, actually came up with a great
Oh, did he? I don't know
story.
if I heard.
Yeah,
I don't know if I
was
heard
attacked by a bear, fought off a bear. He thought I should tell that story. Yeah. But
makes you sound
the truth
noble.
is, I was just an idiot. I put my device away in the camper, was sitting by the campfire, and just quiet night, and I saw lightning off in the distance, and thought maybe I better check the radar because it's the Black Hills. Storms come in. So walked around, grabbed my device, and so I'm walking back to the campfire, pitch black, but light in front of me. Think about that for a moment, how smart that was. And forgot that a portion of the path with that granite, slippery gravel slipped away. So my feet went out from underneath me, behind me. I fell forward. Fortunately, my nose broke my fall.
Yeah.
And my phone protected my eye from a big rock, which, darn it, means I get an iPhone 14 now.
What a shame.
To
which I said, make sure you get the really big one so it protects more of your face next time you fall.
But it did, and I didn't have a mirror, so
sure.
And at first I'm like, oh, that's okay. I think I'm okay. And then realize a little bit later, oh, no, I'm not okay. So I had to take a picture to see what it was. And got it all cleaned up. It's actually not as bad as I thought it would be, but there's some soreness in other parts of my body.
Your ribs.
Put some ribs out of place and some things. But nothing broken.
The one on your cheek, I can barely even tell anymore. That's the one I thought they'd be able to see more because it's your left side, which is facing the camera. But you're healing up well.
Yeah.
You're so youthful, bouncing back quickly from your injuries. I would have been down for months if that. I would have been like, I can't come into work, Pastor Mike. I'm sorry. Yeah. And then so that's topic number one.
Yes.
We're all glad that you're okay.
Yes.
Please be more careful next time you're wandering the hills of South Dakota by yourself. The second thing is this is my favorite time of year. Fall. There's just nothing better than fall. It's just perfect outside. Michael, our producer, and I are happy. He wears vests, so once it's vest season, he's in a good mood. But I like to be able to go outside in a hoodie and still feel cool and comfortable. You, on the other hand, have lost like 187 pounds.
Not quite that
and
many.
Now you're cold all the time, like your wife.
Yeah, I have no insulation anymore. I've
what
noticed.
a tragedy.
So I'm actually drinking hot chocolate here in the studio because I just don't have it.
When we first started this podcast, this room often gets very warm.
Yeah.
When we first started this podcast, we were all on the same page. Let's get the AC as cold as possible in this room when we film. And now there's much more of a battle. Yeah. Pastor Mike,
I'm not there
he's
anymore.
Not looking for numbers that start with 6 for the room temperature.
I actually have a Williston High School game. I'm going to go watch some of our New Hope kids play tonight, and it's chilly outside today, and I'm not excited to go. I'm excited to see them play.
Sure.
I'm like, this is not going to be fun. And I don't have some of the warm clothes I used to have.
Yeah, they don't fit you anymore.
And they don't fit me anymore. Yeah.
Well,
so it's a good problem.
Yeah, it is. It's a good problem.
Quick commercial. So week 5, I think, it's week 5 of the Thread series. So this first 6 weeks, I'm going to share a little bit of the health journey because it connects to what we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
For those that have asked, because so many have asked and been so kind with it.
That's nice that they ask it in a kind way, not...
Well, not everybody's been kind with it, but yeah. But it's closely connected with some things God's been doing in my life.
Yeah.
So I'll share a little bit of that, and I think it'll challenge all of us. So that's a commercial for when we talk. That's the week we're talking about the 10 Commandments.
That's not this coming Sunday, but the following Sunday. Assuming you're listening to this the week it comes out.
Let's see. So we just talked about Joseph.
Yep.
Next week will be Moses. Yep, you're right.
Yep. Thank you.
You're better than me.
Well, let's not get carried away. But on this one thing, I knew a thing, everybody.
Yeah.
If we were on the lobby right now, I'd have our producer hit the rock us applause button. But that's more of a lobby activity than a Grow podcast one. But let's jump in. Let's start talking about Joseph. We're in this 31-week series through the whole Bible, which I was so excited for, and now that we're into it, my excitement has been met. I'm loving it so far. I love it in person with how you're teaching the upper story, lower story, my story. I love how it comes across online at our online campus too. I think it's a really cool way for you to communicate things to us. I think it helped. The visuals are very helpful.
I'm real grateful to a couple of other pastors who I borrowed that idea from. An acquaintance of mine, Kevin Harney, out in Monterey, California. Tough to pastor in Monterey, California.
Yeah, we'll pray for him. Poor guy.
And then actually Max Lucado years ago, and I don't even remember the title of the book, but used some of that upper story, lower story a little bit. So I kind of leaned on and pulled from and then made it our own with that. Yeah. But I want to give credit where credit's due, because I think when you read the Bible through those 3 lenses, it changes things too. Yeah. And then you begin to see your own life through those 3 lenses. When all you're seeing is lower story, it can get discouraging.
Right.
But step back, look at upper story, and then realize, oh, God is writing a story with my life right now. And I hope it's helped me.
Yeah,
in this process, even recently as I walk through this. So.
Yeah, and this last Sunday, again, if you ever miss a Sunday, always go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/New Hope Here. All the services are on there. You can always catch up that way. Whether you are a New Hope Here person or a Williston person, Tioga person, whatever, you can always catch up on there, because the message is the same at every campus. So, or at least it's essentially the same. You just sit in or actually, you're not sitting you're sitting during my story. Yeah,
because whenever I speak it's not like I use the same words all the time. Yeah. It's the same content.
You're not a robot.
Nope. I don't read
confirmed.
It.
Pastor Mike is not a robot.
I don't read it. Yeah.
First moment there, you just said I don't read, and I was hoping you weren't coming back to it.
Don't read it.
But we're gonna talk more about Joseph. So we're in this mini series, Threads. And so the last couple weeks, and we're going to continue doing that through Threads, we like to touch on some of the threads from this part of the Bible that we don't get to, because 31 weeks is not enough to cover every single part of the Bible.
And some of these are so important. In fact, some of them in upcoming messages, I refer back to ones that we only talked about on the podcast. In fact, week 6 of Threads, the last week of Threads, I'm going to talk about 4 threads on that weekend, but we're only going to get 2 on the weekend. The other 2 we'll talk about on the podcast.
Yep.
But all of these connect, and they're important.
So let's touch on a couple that we didn't get to with Joseph.
So there's an upper story thread, and the first part of this is one we've talked about, but I want to add to this. An upper story thread is what we see from Joseph's story. God is always at work on our behalf, and we started that with Genesis 1.
Sure.
But I want to add this kind of, it's not condition, add this kind of addendum to it. God is always at work on our behalf, even when we derail it. Because you look
that's a really nice qualifier.
Yeah.
I like having that one in there.
So you look at Joseph, and Joseph gets these dreams of, I'm going to lead the family, so on and so forth, and he's a braggadocious brat, spoiled brat, and his dad doesn't help, right? And then his brothers react to that and take the bait, and fake his death and wanted to kill him. So this whole sinful pattern, and yet God's plan ultimately happens. And in the middle, if you're reading through this in the end of Genesis, it kind of backs off and begins to tell other stories, like Judah. Here's this little story that has nothing to do with Joseph, and Judah, so one of his brothers, ends up, and go read the story. It's one of those messed up stories of the Bible. Ends up having sex with his daughter-in-law. Thinking she's a prostitute. And here's a guy, and Judah is the one that's promised ultimately to be one of the descendants of Jesus, and he's in the genealogy of Jesus, and you just go, what in the world is happening here? And so they totally mess it up, imperfect people. And yet if you turn to Matthew chapter 1, guess who's in the genealogy of Jesus? Not just Judah. In fact, Judah really isn't mentioned. Guess who's mentioned?
Tamar,
the daughter-in-law. So God is always at work, even when we try to derail it. And we could spend the whole podcast on that one. But that's an important one, I think. And what we just referred to, even in your own life, when you look at your own life through lower story, just what's happening, you've got to step back and go, okay, God's always at work, even when I derail it, even when I sin. Not that he approves.
Sure.
Okay, but he's big enough to take care of that. There's a second thread.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Is it, even when we, so this is where it gets confusing sometimes to think of.
Yes.
So God is omnipotent. He knows everything. He knows what's going to happen. And so this is where I think sometimes people struggle with, like, is he caught? Like, did he make? Because clearly, it looks like his plan was for Joseph to go to Egypt, because all these things worked out perfectly, and it was so important, and it was all a part of his plan for Jesus. So then, did he make Joseph's brothers sell him into slavery? Did he make Joseph be? You would open
that can, wouldn't you? And
you led me there. I'm blaming you.
In theological circles, and you can look this up. People have been wrestling with this, and they call it Calvinism or Arminianism. One emphasizes the sovereignty of God. God's in control and everything. Arminianism would emphasize our choice, and there's extremes of both. I think, and the way we really fall around New Hope is, we have a choice. God hasn't predetermined all of our choices, because that's just not who I see God as being. And when we read, like we talked about in Creation 1, God created us for a relationship. Relationship requires a choice. And so where I believe, and where I would encourage people to study and look through this lens, is God knew their hearts and knew where they were going to be. So in his infinite power and his infinite wisdom, he didn't make the choice for them, but he prepared the way to redeem their choice. Much like, with our kids, there are times we just look at them and we say, here's what you need to do, and we know they're not going to do it.
Not my kids.
Or mine. And I've had times where I'm sitting with people, or I've sat with people in I don't do counseling, but discipleship. I'm not a licensed counselor. And I'll say, now, here's what I think you should do, but it's your choice. And in my mind, I'm going, I know what they're going to choose. And so as a pastor, I'm preparing to help them when they choose that and mess up their life.
Wait, you and I have had those conversations.
No, I'm concerned. So great question, and I think a good clarification for us. God, there's a great line, we've talked about it before, in The Silver Chair, written by C.S. Lewis, where the two kids ask Aslan, the God figure in this, what would have happened if we'd have made different choices? And I won't quote it exactly, but he said, we don't get to know that story. And so we always say, what would have happened if Joseph's brothers hadn't done that? The fact is they did.
Yeah.
And we don't get to know that story.
Yeah.
You know, what happens there.
It's not the Marvel multiverse where we can see that.
There's
All right, I interrupted. Let's go.
No,
you were going to go to a lower thread story.
Yeah, lower story thread. When God is doing something, we're gonna see this. We touched on this with Moses. We'll see this with Joseph. We'll see this with David. We'll see this with Moses here next week and moving forward. When God is doing something, he always invites someone to be part of the story. So God is in this process of redeeming the world. Look at the pattern. He creates Adam and Eve. I want these people to be part of a relationship with me. God is going to clean up the earth, and there's this great line, but Noah. You know, and God invites Abraham to be part of this, and Jacob and Isaac. Now Joseph, he's saving the family from the famine, and he invites Joseph. And he's gonna get Israel out of Egypt, so he invites Moses. And we look at that. Here's where it connects with our story. We look at that and we go, yeah, when God's going to do something huge, he always invites someone huge. They weren't huge when he invited them.
Yeah.
You know, it was them saying yes to the invitation that made them huge. So the thread where it connects to our story is God. This connects back to the previous thread. God is always at work, even when we derail it. God is doing something in someone's life somewhere that's connected to your life, and he's inviting you to be part of it. That is such an important thing. Your part in this story is not insignificant. You say, well, I'm not Moses or Joseph. Well, Moses or Joseph would have said, well, I'm not Moses or Joseph. You know, they said that if they'd have compared
Moses basically did say that.
Yeah, he said, I'm not. You're following Jesus will echo into eternity, and those are two threads we're going to keep coming back to, and I can't say those enough, so I'm going to keep repeating them for us.
And I think that's such an important one on that my story. It's just it's so easy to compare ourselves to these titans of the Bible as we're learning about them going through the Bible, and not recognize what you're saying is that they weren't. He was just a guy. Joseph was just a kind of spoiled brat when it all started. You know, he wasn't this hero of the faith yet at that point, that when God called him. So there's a lot of Joseph's story is kind of depressing, if we're going to be honest. There's a lot of pain.
And what's interesting is we like the end result, so we focus on that.
We skip to the end.
Man, there are decades.
That's what I was just gonna say. You know, when we read it, we can read through it fast.
Years
and we're
in
like,
between.
Okay, he's sold, and then he goes to work in the house, and then
Potiphar's house,
gets sent to jail because of Potiphar's
not
wife.
just any jail, political prison.
Yeah, and then he's in jail, but then he comes out of jail, and we can read through it fast, not recognizing how long he was in this
how many nights
thing
was he locked in solitary confinement with the rats?
Yeah, and so many different awful. Yeah, there's a lot of pain, and so is that pain part of the thread of Joseph, or is it just kind of part of the story?
I believe one of the great reasons that this is in here is to teach us something about how God leads us. And every story in here teaches us a little bit more about how God leads us and how God forms us. Kylie, who's the pastor of our Williston campus, also my wife, she and I taught at a college here a year or two ago. And the message, part of our message was on Joseph's life. And the point, and I think this is a big point of Joseph's life we didn't get to over the weekend, is asking the question, what if the process, the journey, is the more primary part of God's plan than the destination? We look at, and it's important where God was taking Joseph and, him delivering the family. But for Joseph, the process was vital. And I think for us, we want to all get to where we're going.
Right.
And we talked a little bit even about, my own health journey. And I've got a friend who kind of holds me accountable and things. And I was talking to them earlier today, and I'm like, I just want to hit the goal and and move on, and that'd stop me and say, all right, the process is what's important, because we just want to get to where we're going. And I think we need to remember this, that the choices that we make today in the middle of whatever pain we're in the middle of determine our tomorrow. So the habits we form, the choices we make, the compromises or not compromising, like Joseph saying no to Potiphar's wife, the values that we hold. And so anytime you're in the middle of a pain moment, I just wrote down for us, 4 questions, and these might be good even for us to put in the notes here, for us to put in there, because I'm going to bust through these pretty quick. Was, when you're struggling, stop and say, okay, what are the cracks in my character? Because cracks in our character are not revealed when everything is going well, right? They typically are revealed when we're under pressure. So God will typically allow things to reveal cracks. Second one is, where am I strong and where can I get stronger? Sometimes God is allowing something because we're already strong and he wants us to get stronger. And then we need to learn what fuels our faith. What really fuels my faith? The Lord has worked in my prayer retreat I was talking about. There was a couple of questions that I was working through, and I'm like, Lord, I don't know the answer to that. Just working through even some of the things these last couple of years with the pandemic. And out of that prayer time, it's like, oh, that fuels your faith. And one of those things, the big thing for me is developing people. And he just gave me an incredible opportunity to have a conversation with a gentleman this last week that was intense, and it was, raw and ragged. And this guy, God's got him on an amazing journey, and I'm so proud of him. And afterwards, I just walked out of there. It's like, I'm ready to go climb a mountain right now. It just fueled my faith. And part of it is, the fourth question is, then what matters to me? And that's part of that. God wants to reveal to you what matters to you, because as you follow him, he doesn't make you less of you. He wants you to learn who you are. And most of that is only learned in the journey. And we don't typically learn when things are easy. Yeah. We typically learn when things are tough.
What would you say to someone who might be facing discouragement because, so you said my choices today determine my tomorrow, and what if I've made bad choices with my habits and my choices and my compromise? What if Joseph had slept with Potiphar's wife? Yeah. Right? Which again is still just remarkable. He's a single guy who's been a slave for forever. Feels like everybody he's ever known has abandoned him, and he still said no. So props to Joseph. Yeah. But what if he did? What if he gives in there? And what if, maybe not that same scenario, but I've made, I make this mistake or I make that mistake. Well, now I've held myself back. I'm not as mature as I could be in my faith. What would you say to someone who might be feeling discouragement about their past habits, their past choices, or even current ones that they're trying to correct?
Well, as we fast forward through the story, we'll see people who make those mistakes. So for example, we'll jump forward several hundred years here to 2 kings, the first 2 kings of Israel. Saul, who followed God for a time and then made a series of horrible choices, but never repented from them. David, who made a series of amazing choices and then near the end of his life did sleep with a woman and murdered her husband. And yet God redeemed that, and in fact promised that his descendants would be on the throne. Ultimately, Jesus was descended from him biologically. And he's like, what is the difference? The difference is repentance. And the difference, like with Joseph, and we don't know what would have happened. So maybe he failed. Maybe he did sleep with Potiphar's wife. The question is, when you screw up, recognize, let's go back to the first thread. God is always at work, even when we derail stuff. If we turn back to him, he will always redeem it. It may look differently. It will look differently than it would have. Adam and Eve failed, and the whole world has looked differently since. But redemption is still possible.
That, I feel like that can still almost be discouraging. Like you're saying, it'll look differently, right? So it's hard to not go back and be like, if I would have just done that, I understand that God can redeem me, but what if I wouldn't have, done this in my marriage, or what if I wouldn't have done this at work, or in my private life, whatever it is. I feel like it could that can still be like a discouraging moment.
And the enemy will use that as shame and it will turn into shame, and shame will eventually turn into devaluing of who you are in God's eyes. Yeah. And so you have to fight that. Be aware. What I did was wrong. Let's not excuse it. Yep. What I did was wrong, and I messed up. But that doesn't mean that God loved me less. He died on the cross knowing that I would need his blood. Yeah. Knowing that I would need his blood. So let's go back to Abraham's story we talked about last week. Remember, God walked the path of blood, saying, I will help you become who I promised you to be, and I'll pay the price with my own body and my own blood to make it happen, knowing that we'll mess it up. Yeah. And so at the time, you've got to fight that shame, not excuse it. We aren't victims here. Yeah. We are people who've made horrible choices. That doesn't mean we're victims. Victim means I have no way out of this, and it somehow happened to me. No, I made the choice, but I can now make a different choice, and with God's help. I've had a couple of conversations lately with a couple of people around their journey. It's so much fun to watch them, and they have said, and one of them might be watching now. I invited them to watch, and if so, you'll recognize this. Where they said, I fought so hard to get where I am. And going, that's awesome, because you really have. Now imagine what it'll be like fighting with God's help. Yeah. You can get so much further and so much deeper and find so much healing. Yeah. Because he says, take my yoke upon you. You're going to work on this. But my yoke is easy and my burden is light. In other words, he does most of the pulling. Yeah.
We always talk about next steps here on the Grow podcast. We say growth always starts with the next step. So can you give us a few things from Joseph's story and his growth and maturity that we can put into actually put into practice in our lives?
I think there's three big things that God, and we'll see this thread in other places, that God always is working on especially when we're going through tough times. Yeah. He's teaching us dependence. We saw this in Abraham. We'll see this in Joseph. We'll see this in Moses. We'll see this in future. He's teaching us wholeness, how we bring everything together, like with Joseph. Integrity, discipline, relationships, emotional wholeness, being able to forgive. So he's learning, and this will really make sense when we get into the law here in a couple weeks. He's teaching us how to live life according to his design. Fast forward, and that his design is within limits, so limits produce life. That'll be a fast forward. And then the third thing is identity. He's teaching us who he is and who we are. I'll qualify that a little bit. Almost always, but it was pretty close to always. Yeah. Those are the three things. So the question for you right now is just ask God to show you, where's he working? It'll probably be in all three, but definitely there's one that he's got you more focused on than anything else. For me right now, he's helping me relearn some dependence kinds of things and some wholeness. I mean, health journey and some of these kinds of things. So where is that?
And we're at the end of the podcast, so this is the part where Pastor Mike is going to sing one of his favorite tunes from Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. No. So go ahead, Pastor Mike, and let us. No, I thought that's how we. No. Is that not? Did I read the notes wrong?
I was pretty sure that was our producer that was going to do that.
Oh yeah.
The wrong Michael.
Have you ever seen Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat?
Not in person.
I haven't seen any of it. Is it a musical? Was that?
Yeah.
Okay. I just assumed it was a musical, not like a play.
Yeah, and some pretty amazing music with it. Our family loves musicals.
Right. That's why I assumed you'd be able to pull a song from it. But
I don't have that kind of memory.
The only thing I've ever seen from Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat is in that episode of. Did you ever watch Seinfeld?
Yes.
There's an episode of Seinfeld where Kramer borrows the Technicolor Dreamcoat from a friend of his who's like a stagehand or whatever and wanders around town in it. It's pretty fantastic.
That's an old one. Yeah. That's a classic.
So I don't know anything about the production, but I know the coat's crazy looking when Kramer wears it. Well, thank you, Pastor Mike. I've always liked the podcast, but I don't know. I feel like it's tying really well into this series and it's enjoyable to kind of get to touch on the stuff that you're missing.
And this takes us back to old school for me growing up. This is kind of like Sunday night church or Wednesday night Bible study.
Sure. Yeah.
It just takes us a little bit deeper beyond Sunday morning, and we need that.
Yeah, plus whatever the first 5 minutes are whenever we...
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is.
Did you do that at Sunday night church?
Sometimes.
I never had Sunday night church, so...
That's fellowship in the lobby.
There you go. Yeah, it's fellowship time. Well, we're so thankful that all of you joined us this week. Thanks for being a part of our New Hope family. And thanks to those of you that have been joining us more recently. Those of you that have been sharing the podcast with people that you care about, people that you love, keep doing that. Subscribe, like the video, write us a comment, give us some feedback, stuff like that. We'd love to hear. And I still need a few more questions for Pastor Mike. We want to do another Q&A. I've got a couple lined up, but we need more than that. So give me some more Q&A questions for Pastor Mike, ranging from anything about his personal life to deep theological questions, and we'll ask them.
All right. But that's a long pause. Okay,
I was just waiting. I thought you were going to say, no, nothing about my personal life. We had a few personal life questions in the last one. We got to hear about how you met, I think, how you met your wife or how you proposed to your wife. Might have been both. I don't know. Yeah. So those were fun. We want to do another one. So make sure you send those in, info@newhopewilliston.com, and we'll get those questions. But yeah, other than that, we will see you guys next time.